The open road has been a huge part of my life for as long as I can remember. Growing up on a farm, I naturally learned how to drive very early. And by age 8, I could drive just about anything that had 4 wheels. However, before that, I was defined by 3 wheels. I was biker boy. This was the real me. Oh, sure, I could do angelic when called upon, but I just knew that my future involved tricycles. Now, Lisa and Mark wanted us to adapt to change. Do you remember how easy it was to change when you were this age? You could change your mind every day about everything, even careers, because in first grade, there was absolutely no doubt that I was going to be a farmer. By second grade, that had changed to forest ranger. And by third grade, of course, I grew very introspective, and I began to have doubts about both of them, and then I got the report card from Mrs. Thompson. Yeah. Well, let's scan down to the middle of page 1, and we'll find some plain evidence of some alpha male tendencies. Courteous and kind, not always. Respects the rights of others, not always. Then scanning down a little bit further, makes good use of time, fair. Well, folks, if I wasn't already in enough trouble, let's move on to page 2. Go down to the middle of page 2. Stevie is excitable and often does not know he is out of order. He's bossy and he likes to lead the group. However, luckily, he is sensitive and feels badly if corrected. And I know that some of you are reading ahead, okay? Years and years of therapy have put me right here, people. No particular talent. Well, my world was shattered in third grade. Not creative? What are you talking about? I come from a long line of creatives, and folks, I am the third with my name. And here on the left is my dad, and on the right is my granddad, Rudyard Stephen Uzzell the first, our namesake. And guess what he did? He had his own company, and he designed rides for amusement parks. He even had a ride in Coney Island. So my goals changed. Since I had no particular talent, I decided that my life's work would be to not miss any meals. And you know something? Within a very short amount of time, I was really good at it. And by 9th grade, I was 5'9", and I weighed 210 pounds. And trust me, you didn't want me to run into you on the football field at a full tilt boogie. But look what I'm carrying here, my dad's camera, which, by the way, he forbid me to use. Too expensive, I might ruin it. However, I could conspire with my mom and did frequently to use it whenever he was out of the country on business. Well, by my senior year in high school, I was the perfect weight for someone who was 6'5". However, I was only 5'11" and 225 pounds, so what to do about college? What to do? Well, my parents could only afford to send my older sister to college, and I was very fortunate to be nominated to a very special school where you get paid to attend, the United States Military Academy. Or as we affectionately called it, Henry Hudson's Home for Wayward Boys. And I lost 25 pounds the first day of plebe summer. They don't call it Beast Barracks for nothing. And here, we all had alpha male tendencies. We had to make use of every single second of our time. And we had new skills, and I became incredibly good at locker maintenance. I mean, look at that locker. And then my dad came and he taught me how to sit with my hands folded properly. I didn't know how useful this was going to be. And then midway through my second year, I finally realized I really did have a particular creative talent. So I resigned from West Point and I went to journalism school at the University of Missouri in hopes of becoming a National Geographic photographer. At the end of my junior year at Mizzou, the White House news photographers, the guys and gals who covered the president, decided to give a scholarship to a student studying photojournalism. And yep, yours truly was the proud recipient. And because of that recognition, I became the first intern the National Geographic ever had on the executive editorial floor. I mean, really, look at that picture. Is that a young executive or what? Really? And here, folks, I finally got to lead the group. And look how nicely my hands are folded. I mean, come on, I learned. I really did learn. I changed. And look what I'm doing. I'm supervising. Doesn't matter that she was the top of her class at Vassar, and I had no idea what she was talking about most of the time, but I was her boss. And almost immediately, I had one of those incredible transitional epiphanies. I hated supervising. I didn't want to lead the group. I just wanted to lead myself. And first, however, I had to finish the University of Missouri, fulfill my military commitment from my time at West Point. And while this might look like a scene from Good Morning Vietnam, I was very fortunate. I was on assignment to leave the United States in various areas of the world, but I never left New Jersey. And I was assigned to a closed-circuit TV station at Fort Monmouth, teaching strategic microwave radio. Yeah. Well, near the end of my 2.5-year military career, I received a call from the editor of the National Geographic, and he asked me to come back as his personal assistant. Well, I took about 3 picoseconds to make that decision. And do you all remember this incredible image of this young executive? Well, I took off 5 months before I returned to the Geographic, and I came back as a chia pet. Now, at the Geographic, it was incredibly exciting. Even cycling to work every morning gave me a chance to create images for the magazine. There were Apollo launches. There were encounters with sharks. There were rodents who thought my beard would make great nesting material. And as my hair grew longer, my assistants got younger. And almost every day, I had it reinforced that I really didn't want to lead the group. I wanted to be like my granddad, work for myself. So at age 28, with 2 friends who were also former Geographic photographers and no business experience, between the 3 of us, we did the only logical thing. We borrowed $300,000 in 1976 at prime plus 3. Well, for those of you who are, I told you we didn't have any business experience. For those of you who are keeping score, that was 10.5% interest. We didn't sleep much, folks. We were incredibly scared. We were also incredibly excited. Our houses were our collateral, and that fact motivated us to work harder than we ever knew we could possibly work. We succeeded beyond our wildest dreams, and we paid that loan back in a little bit less than 2 years. The 3 of us soon found, however, that we wanted to go in some different creative directions, and to maintain our friendship above all, we went our separate ways. I went through what seems like a mandatory documentary filmmaking phase, but before long, I returned to my first love, making still images that tell stories. And today, 53 years after my first published image in 7th grade, I still love that process just as much as I did then. And much of my success I attribute to the practice I have had at the creative problem-solving process. And the best place I've ever found to solve a problem, any kind of problem, is on the open road. Now, all of you have had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time on a road that looks like this. Well, you too have experienced this amazing mind-opening phenomenon. And you probably wonder right along with me, why does an open road always open your mind? How does it work? Well, we could spend a whole lot of time parsing the neurophysiology of an alpha wave state, but it's a whole lot easier for me to say I have no idea. And I'm not quite sure anybody else does either. Plus, all too often, the problem we have to solve is limited vision. So how do we solve that? Once again, I don't have a short answer, folks, but I do have some empirical evidence to share with you because I have taken hundreds of clients and crew with me over the years, and I've watched the open road work its magic on all of them. Within usually just an hour, our moods have brightened and our troubles have resolved in solution. Well, why? Why does this always happen? Well, I call it the spirit of the open road. Your senses are filled with new sights and sounds and smells, and your mind is opened by these new experiences. The spirit of the open road gives you what I believe is the first step in the problem-solving process. It allows you to take a step away from your immediate world, and yet it gives you a visual focal point. You know, today we hear a whole lot about multitasking. And in a room filled with consummate practitioners, I need only remind you that multitasking is really the opportunity to screw up more than one thing at a time. I'll take that as a laugh of recognition. I think we've all been there. Well, being on the open road is one of the very few times when we are truly doing two things at once. We are stationary in a moving vehicle. That effect always puts my subconscious into overdrive. The open road never fails to open your mind. And as leaders, remember, the very first step to clarity is an open mind. And once your mind is open, a formidable and a boundless power is unlocked, and it's called your imagination. The open road also mimics the route that your imagination takes in getting from problem to solution. Sometimes that route is just a simple path, and sometimes it's a roller coaster ride, and sometimes that route has gentle curves. But I guarantee you that in today's complex world, you're going to see yourself coming and going. Well, folks, if change is really just a bend in the road, remember what Lisa and Mark have asked us to do. How do we get ourselves, much less anyone else, to the point where we actually look forward to making the turn? Well, regardless of what the open road is planned for you, when you're on it, you not only have the belief that you're going to get from A to B, but you love the journey, and that love fills you with optimism. Psychiatrist Dr. Jean Boland says the very act of seeking sets something in motion to meet us. Something in the universe or in the unconscious responds as if to an invitation. Well, where does the very act of seeking find us in today's world? It'll frequently find us in some form of a rolling parking lot. Plus, this is as close as many of us who live in big cities ever get to an open road. How inexorably sad is this? Plus, every city of any size anywhere in the world has at least one interchange that's a Gordian knot. Our lives are stuffed with traffic of all kinds, not just vehicular and pedestrian, but visual and electronic, with emails and pages and faxes and tweets and texts and iPhones and Blackberries and Blueberries and Halle Berries, and if you're old enough, Chuck Berries. So nice you all know who Chuck Berry is. And the list goes on and on and on. And though my assignments take me to real open roads, they're getting harder and harder to find. So I had to find a way to translate the spirit of the open road into an attitude for problem solving. I had to find a way to access this state of mind whenever I wished and wherever I was, even sitting at my desk. Well, how do you do that? The first technique to gain access to this state of mind, you already know. It's to make all preparations necessary. Necessary being the operative word here. Now, I know that you have heard this your whole life. And as leaders, I'm quite sure that those words have come out of almost every single one of your mouths. But I wonder how many of you have ever stopped as an adult to think about what those words really mean. Because for me, I realized I didn't even know the first step in making all preparations necessary until I got my first assignment for National Geographic. Even though I happened to have been the assistant to the editor of the magazine, in order to get that first assignment, I had to put a portfolio together and submit it to Bob Gilka, who was the director of photography when I was there, just like anybody else who wanted to shoot for the Geographic. Well, a couple of very anxious weeks went by. Mr. Gilka called me back into his office, and he handed me a letter. The letter had one sentence. It said, "Please make all preparations necessary to take on the assignment of the Inner Hebrides Islands." Well, folks, this was a dream come true. I was 25 years old. I was so excited. All I could think to say was thank you, and I got up. I left Mr. Gilka's office. I began this out-of-body experience walking down the hall, And Jim Blair, one of the senior photographers, was walking the other way, saw a rookie who had just gotten his first assignment, and he said, "Steve, where are you going?" And I said, "Well, Jim," and I consciously lowered my voice so I wouldn't squeak. I said, "I'm going to the Inner Hebrides." And as the words came out of my mouth, it occurred to me for the very first time that I didn't know where they were. "Congratulations," Jim said, "you're going to love them." He, of course, had been everywhere, and I thought, this man's going to think I'm a real hayseed. So I gathered myself, and I said, "Jim, what airport did you fly into?" I thought that was pretty good. And with no hesitation, he said, "You will want to start in Inverness first." And in that millisecond of non-recognition, he knew that I had no idea where Inverness was either. So he patted me on the shoulder, and he said, "Steve, you're going to Scotland." So what's the first step in making all preparations necessary? You got to know where you're going. It's real simple, folks. If you want to lead, you have to know where you are going. Now, if that's not sophisticated enough for you all, I'll go put on a three-piece suit, and I'll come back here, and I'll insist that you have absolute clarity of your strategic intent. You might feel better if I said that. But guess what that means? That means you have to know where you're going. And I don't want this thought to just apply to your work life. I would love it if this thought applied to your whole life. Because in order for you to really know where you're going, you have to constantly challenge your assumptions. Why? Because all of us, and I do mean all of us, have the will and the desire to be in the driver's seat. But if you don't continually challenge your assumptions about everything, you don't really know where you're going. And then every road is the wrong road, and any road will get you there. And many times knowing where you're going, particularly the older we get, is knowing how to get out of your own way. Now, do I mean knowing where you're going literally? Well, absolutely. Look at the popularity of GPS units. They're everywhere. But I also mean it personally, professionally, spiritually, intellectually, philosophically. Throw in epistemologically, the great 75-cent word that means how we know what we know, since each of us in this room knows what we know in a different way. You pick an adverb, because they all apply. Well, I had just a couple of weeks before departure to learn where I was going, and unlike this young Scotsman who's learning from his dad, I was on my own. Now, the quickest way I've found to learn where you're going is to question everything, especially re-examine all the stuff you think you know. Be willing to start at the beginning, and don't overlook the simple. Now, whether you learned it from a mentor or a parent or in school, ask and get an answer that makes sense to you the 6 questions of journalism: who, what, when, where, why, and how. But we don't live in a 6-question world, do we? Everyone in this room knows that we live in a world of endless nuance and increasing complexity. And every day, we are asked to assimilate huge quantities of information. But those 6 questions and their answers will get you well over the 90th percentile of what you need to know. Let's take the simplest of examples from Scotland. Those of you who really know your farm animals will instantly recognize the blue-tailed sheep. I knew there were some sheep farmers in this audience. Well, the rest of us are left to wonder, what are those marks? Who put them there? How? Why? When? Where? Well, the answers to these 6 questions in this instance taught me a little bit more about sheep than I really wanted to know. These were all ewes who'd been serviced by a ram. Have no idea whether it was the same incredibly tired but amazingly happy ram. I mean, come on, what guy wouldn't want that job, really? Now, part of the fun of asking the 6 questions is learning a new vocabulary. This is how they make a malt in Scotland. It's a single malt, to be more precise. It's Lagavulin, to be exact. And this is a ferry. You can see that they still have a little more work to do on the drive-on, drive-off part. Nothing, however, could have prepared me for the spiritual power of the ubiquitous Celtic cross, and I finally made the image that captured what I felt on the tiny island of Iona, and it became the lead photograph for the story. Now, my commitment to preparation increased with each assignment. My next story was Long Island Sound. Here we are in Mystic, Connecticut. My research told me that the square rigger in the foreground, the first one, the Charles W. Morgan, was the last, and it was the greatest of all the whaling ships. Well, I decided that I wanted to make a photograph that made this ship look like it was still in active service. And that research had me ready when the opportunity came on the very first day of the assignment, on the first roll of film. This is day one, roll one, frame one. If I hadn't done that research, folks, I wouldn't have known what I was looking at. During my coverage, however, a constant image intrigued me. Little did any of us know that this view would become historic. Twin Towers were only a year old when I made this image. From most points on the water in the western end of Long Island Sound, the towers dominated the spectacular skyline of Manhattan. In this photograph, we are 20 miles from the city. Well, to find the location for the image that I had in mind, I made the commitment to go to the end of every road that went to the water on both sides of the Sound. And near Stamford, Connecticut, 35 miles from Manhattan, I finally found the spot. Now, did I know that that sailboat would come across the foreground in the absolute perfect place? Of course I didn't. But Louis Pasteur said chance favors the prepared mind. And every day, those 5 words have a profound effect on my life. Preparation lays the groundwork for magic to happen. Folks, consider your eyes are only ever going to see what your mind is prepared to comprehend. If your mind won't comprehend it, you might as well have your eyes closed.